Hello! Today we start with a sad story. We're reading Mark chapter 6, verse 14. King Herod heard about this, for Jesus' name had become well known. Some were saying, "John the Baptist has been raised from the dead, and that is why miraculous powers are at work in him." Others said, "He is Elijah," and still others claimed, "He is a prophet, like one of the prophets of long ago." But when Herod heard this, he said, "John, who I beheaded, has been raised from the dead." So this is written in a very interesting way because it's like a flashback. Basically, Herod was hearing about Jesus and how his ministry was spreading, and mistakenly he thought Jesus was John raised from the dead. Then starts the flashback. For Herod himself had given orders to have John arrested, and he had him bound and put in prison. He did this because of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, whom he had married. For John had been saying to Herod, "It is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife." So Herodias nursed a grudge against John and wanted him killed. But she was not able to, because Herod feared John and protected him, knowing him to be a righteous and holy man. When Herod heard John, he was greatly puzzled. Yet he liked to listen to him. So a funny thing, Emperor Augustus didn't want Herod to be named king, but Herodias, being the insert word of your choosing here, kept pressing for him to get that title, till eventually Augustus considered Herod a traitor. And it is very possible that Mark is giving him this position as irony, which is funny. And reading this, you realize that maybe Herod had a good heart, but he was just a bad decision maker and a chicken. At first Herod didn't want John killed, and he even listened to what John had to say, and it seems he was even a little invested. But let's read on. Finally, the opportune time came. On his birthday, Herod gave a banquet for his high officials and military commanders and the leading men of Galilee. When the daughter of Herodias came in and danced, she pleased Herod and his dinner guests. The king said to the girl, "Ask me for anything you want, and I'll give it to you." And he promised her with an oath, "Whatever you ask, I will give you, up to half my kingdom." She went out and said to her mother, "What shall I ask for?" "The head of John the Baptist," she answered. At once the girl hurried in to the king with the request, "I want you to give me right now the head of John the Baptist on a platter." The king was greatly distressed, but because of his oaths and his dinner guests, he did not want to refuse her. So he immediately sent an executioner with orders to bring John's head. The man went, beheaded John in the prison, and brought back his head on a platter. He presented it to the girl, and she gave it to her mother. On hearing of this, John's disciples came and took his body and laid it in a tomb. "It was the woman, Lord." That's Genesis 3:12. The man was innocent until he gave him to the woman. History repeats itself, and it seems to repeat itself in a different way later, when Herod meets Jesus before the crucifixion. It does seem like Herod hardens his heart there, but it was probably hardened because he was coaxed into doing so by the chief priests and scribes. But Herodias obviously was a very evil type, very manipulative and bent on getting her way. And it doesn't say how Herodias' daughter danced, but let's just say that square dancing doesn't convince a man to give you up to half a kingdom. But still, it doesn't do well to measure evils. Whether it was Herod, Herodias, or Herodias Jr., John was beheaded. In the Matthew version, it says that John's disciples also told Jesus. This is one of those things where it doesn't mention it, but you know that it just tore Jesus to the bone. I might not even doubt that he cried harder for John than he did for Lazarus. Whoa, spoiler alert. But anyways, the good thing we know is that John's mission was complete at this point. He was to prepare the way for the Lord, and that was accomplished. Now we have a more fun story, so that's good. We're reading in Mark chapter 6, verse 30. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. I hope that boat ride did them well, because the apostles just came back from healing and preaching for days on end, probably getting kicked out of towns, and probably getting poor sleep, and probably barely getting fed. So I hope that they had a feast on that boat. Probably not, though. The people found him, and of course he needed to preach. It's great that many were interested in hearing about the kingdom of heaven. Perhaps some of them were more of the accusatory type, but either way, Jesus had compassion on them. But this story is called the feeding of the 5,000, so there were a lot of people there. By this time it was late in the day, so his disciples came to him. "This is a remote place," they said, "and it's already very late. Send the people away so that they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat." But he answered, "You give them something to eat." Then they said, "What? What the?" No, they didn't say that. But they were probably perplexed, like, "You think I'm a sous chef in my spare time that also just so happens to be a millionaire?" They said to him, "That would take more than half a year's wages. Are we going to go and spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat?" "How many loaves do you have?" he asked. "Go and see." When they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. In the John version, it says that Jesus actually asked Philip the question, "Where can we buy bread for these people to eat?" Then Philip replied, "It would take more than half a year's wages." Then Andrew and Simon Peter are the ones that find a boy with 5 loaves and 2 fish. I remember when I was a kid, the boy with the 5 loaves and 2 fish seemed to have more of a lunchbox type of situation, which could be the case, but that seems like a lot of food for a small boy. A minuscule amount for 5,000, but still. I wonder what his story is. In The Chosen, Jesus heals his father, so that of course gives him a good reason to give up his food. But that's just speculation, so who knows why he gave it up. But he was very gracious. Then Jesus directed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to his disciples to distribute to the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish. The number of the men who had eaten was 5,000. The organization was nice, probably difficult, but Jesus wanted everything to be as calm as possible. He didn't want a mob. And what a miracle it was. What I definitely took away from this is the fact that he didn't create all of that out of nothing. It started with something. We know that he would have had the power to just create some prime rib out of thin air and use that to feed the people, but he chose to use what they had. That can pertain to our lives a lot. Sometimes we expect God to make something out of nothing. And he can, but he doesn't. You don't get something for nothing, which is yet another Rush song. But sometimes I don't like that happens. Sometimes I just wish that he could fix something for me without me doing much and in the best way possible. But I eventually realized that he wants us to be a part of the miracles that happen, which can sometimes lead to them not seeming to be that great. But our relationships with God is more important than anything, which means that he loves us. Thanks, guys.